Hi, I'm Rebecca Hubbard from Pecan Creek Ranch, and today I would like to talk to you about how to get started with EAS paperwork. If you're a mental health professional and you've been doing services for a long time, your paperwork is already set in stone, and now you want to do EAS. So what do you need to change? What do you need to add? We're going to talk about that. But what if you're new completely to mental health or coaching and EAS? How do you create your paperwork from scratch? We're going to give you some ideas about what your paperwork should include and what kind of things you need to think about. So let's get started. All right, so when you first get started, it's going to feel a lot like you're drowning. Or in this case, this lady is stuck in the sand and she is getting buried, and so is her horse. So we want to throw you a little bit of a line to give you some things to think about when creating your paperwork. So the things that you need to consider are a lot of different laws. There are some federal laws like HIPAA and HITECH, and then you're going to have state laws that maybe go over the same things as HIPAA and HITECH. And maybe your state has more requirements than HIPAA or HITECH. And if that's true, then you need to abide by your state's laws because it has more requirements or more penalties. And so whatever is the toughest of those is what you want to write your paperwork toward to meet that requirement. You want to look at the mental health laws in your state. What is it that your state requires of you regarding paperwork and how you conduct yourself? You want to look at your liability insurance, both your professional liability insurance and your equine liability insurance, because your equine liability insurance is going to have different requirements and things that it expects you to do, and you want to have that in your paperwork. You want to think about your values and how those apply to the work that you do and how you approach your work because of your values. And you also want to think about how equine assisted services are vastly different than traditional services that are provided inside. And then what does that mean as far as what a client needs to know about receiving services that are both outside and with large animals? So these are some of the things that you need to start to consider. Your equine assisted paperwork is not going to have less information. Instead, it's going to have a lot more information because there's just a lot more that clients need to know. It's really going to be like your paperwork is on steroids. It's just going to be more bulked up. There's a lot of things that a client needs to understand in order to receive equine assisted services that they don't need to understand in order to sit on a couch and talk to someone. So the forms that you need to create are listed on this page, and we're going to talk about some of them, but mostly what we're going to talk about is sort of the overarching ideas of what needs to be considered when you're creating these forms. If you're a coaching person and you're not a mental health person, you still want to have a contract and not an informed consent necessarily, but an informed consent really is a contract that explains things to clients about what you're going to do and what is your job and what are the things that you're responsible for and what are the things that you expect from them. And you want to have one of those. You also want to make sure that you have a really good liability waiver. Some insurance companies have them for you to use and some don't. A lot of the liability waivers have the same kinds of language, but your state may expect some very specific language. So you want to look at your equine liability laws in your state when you're making your liability waiver. It's always a good idea to have an attorney to look over that sort of paperwork for you. Other things that you want to consider are, your how you're going to bill, how you're going to assess, your good faith estimates, any authorization to release information. All those kinds of forms need to be in your paperwork packet. When we think about an informed consent, we just think of it, like I said, as a contract, right? And it's going to vary from state to state. Every state has different expectations for how you're going to operate. But in general, there are some basic things that all informed consents or all contracts should have, and we'll talk a little bit about what those are. In order to kind of figure out what you want to include in your informed consent or contract and in your paperwork, I think it's best to think about the worst case scenario situation, because it'll help you sort of think through the things that you want to have in place. What if a parent brings a kid for services and that parent is impaired through alcohol or drugs? What if a person comes to you and talks to you about abuse or neglect, or that they've been assaulted? What happens if a client gets hurt on your property, either through equine related services or they just fall down and break a leg? These are the things that you want to think through, because then you know kind of what you want to have in place for your paperwork to address these kind of scenarios. In your contract or your informed consent, these are all the things that we think are really important. And I'm not going to go over all of them, but I want you to just look at it and see that there's a vast array of information here that goes from, who are you and what services you provide, to the risks and benefits of the services. Not only do you need to talk about the risk and benefits of the services itself, but the risk and benefits of working with horses or equines too. So there's always this added layer. You want to think about confidentiality. If you are operating on a farm, other people are going to be there. What are the expectations for confidentiality? How will you handle that? What will happen if other people are around as far as they're receiving services too? How do you handle that? So these are things that you need to consider as you're creating your contract or informed consent. Our work is really different. We are not sitting in a cozy office. We are working with large animals. We're outside. We're in the weather. We're dealing with bugs and all kinds of creatures. And we have other things that may be happening where we're providing services that makes this a little bit muddy. These are all the things that we need to consider as we're creating our paperwork. So when you're creating your paperwork, think about safety. Think about, how do you want your clients to be safe? Are you going to have a list of rules that you need them to follow? Like, don't walk behind a horse, don't hand feed them, always walk on the left side. All of these things, which you can do. You just need to outline them in your paperwork if that's your expectation. At our place, we don't have those lists of rules, because we want what we do at our place to translate for the client out into their real life. And all of those sorts of rules don't really translate to their life. But learning how to listen to their own body and respond to their body and what their body is feeling in the environment and from the equine is something that they can translate into safety in their everyday life. And so that's what we focus on, and that's what we talk about in our paperwork about being safe. You really want to talk about what are the real risks of working with equines. You do not want to gloss over this. You want to be bluntly clear that people could die, that it is possible. We've never had anybody die, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. And when you're outlining in your informed consent or your contract what the risks are, that's one of the risks. So you want to be really, really clear that they could get run over, stepped on, bit, killed, all of these horrible things could happen, because that's part of being able to make a good decision for yourself. You know what the risks are, you know what the benefits are, and do the benefits outweigh the risks, is one of the ways we make informed choices, and that's why it's called an informed consent. You want to talk a lot about the role that you play in your client safety. Is it your job to keep your client safe? Because if it is, then you need to spell that out, and that's 100% on your shoulders. If it is not your job to keep the client safe, then you need to spell that out too. Make sure that everybody that comes on site signs a liability waiver, not just clients, but people who are there for tours or meet and greets. Make sure that everybody signs one, because if something were to happen, you need to have that in your file that says they knew the risks of being on property. So we've talked a little bit about these risks and benefits. Counseling and coaching has its own benefits. You want to talk about those in general, like what are the benefits of coaching? What are the benefits of receiving mental health services? What are the risks of coaching? What are the risks of mental health services? Those are really important to outline for your clients, and then go into the actual specific risks and benefits of working with equines, because those are going to be separate from that general coaching or that general mental health risks and benefits. When you're working outside and you're working at a working ranch or working farm, things can get really muddy about who's around. Maybe you have the vet there, or you have the farrier there, you have somebody delivering hay. These are things that you need to be aware of because they're going to impact confidentiality. If you have more than one session going on at the same time, because you have multiple providers, how do you safeguard your client's confidentiality? You want to be able to talk in your paperwork about those specific things. We have at our place a rule, for instance, that you're not allowed to walk up to another group of people because you don't know why they're there. You're supposed to stay just with your group. And so we talk about that. If the vet is there, let's say we had an emergency in session, clients get to choose whether they want to stay or not. Sometimes clients stay and they want to help their horse through this difficult thing. And so we want the clients to understand, if they choose that their confidentiality is then broken because the person may assume that they are a client. And so thinking through those things, talking to clients about them, having them in your paperwork is really, really important. If you work in a team, helping people understand the role of the equine professional and that they have to keep the client's information confidential as well is really important too. Since we don't work inside, be very clear about what your sessions are going to look like, how people should dress, because people will come dressed like the lady in this picture, dressed to the nines in shoes that they can't move quickly in, right? Or clothes that they really are important to them, and then they get really upset when a horse snots on them or they get dirty. So really talking about what should you wear. Should you wear dangly earrings? What happens if a horse grabs one of them, right? Dangly necklaces. Should you wear sunscreen, a hat, closed-toed shoes? All of these things need to be outlined very specifically because your client is not going to think about them. You have to let the client know what is expected because they don't know what to expect. They've never had services outside. They don't know that they can't show up in flip-flops. They don't understand the risk of showing up in flip-flops, working with horses, or being out with the burrs or the bugs or the snakes. They don't think about any of those things because they're never outside. So you have to sort of think through it for them. You want to also talk about how are services provided? What kind of things do you do in your sessions? Lots of people will come expecting to ride. If you don't do any riding in your sessions, you want to talk about that in your paperwork. You want to talk about if you ride, how do you ride? How does that get done in sessions? What do sessions look like? You want to talk to people about who to bring, because I tell you, you're outside, they feel like it's very informal. They can bring anybody. They can bring their neighbor. They can bring their best friend. They want everybody to meet their equine. They might even bring their pets. I've had lots of people bring dogs and cats and even birds to sessions because they want to introduce their home friends to their new friend. And so you want to be very clear about, is that okay or not? And sometimes it's your liability insurance that tells you whether that's okay or not. You want to talk about the weather because people don't think about what's it going to be like to be outside when it's 30 degrees or 108 like it's been here all summer, it feels like. At what point do you cut off providing services? Or do you provide services no matter what because you have an indoor place to do them? These are things that you really want to talk about with clients. We are outside at our facility, even if it's raining, as long as it's not lightning. And as long as it's not raining so hard that we can see each other. Otherwise, we just expect people to wear rain jackets, and we go. And we work with the horses because that's where they are. But if that's not what you do, that's fine. You just want to outline it and talk about it in your paperwork. What do we do if it's snowing? What do we do if the weather is poor? What do we do if it's dangerous? Do we cancel sessions? All of those things just need to be spelled out. Whatever decision you make is fine. How you do your progress notes and your treatment plans may not be any different than you would for a regular coaching or mental health session. Some people choose to not ever mention the equine in their notes or the work that the person's doing with the equines. At our facility, we not only talk about the work that they're doing, but we talk about what happened in session with the equine. We mention the equine by name. We talk about the equine professional. And so this is what we chose to put in our assessments and our progress notes and in our treatment plans. We talk very specifically about the relationship work that clients will be doing. If we're doing rhythmic riding, which is an intervention to help rewire the brain, then we talk about that. And so you have to decide how much do you want to talk about those things in your paperwork. And that's just part of when you're creating your paperwork, how you do it. I try to create our paperwork where you don't have to write a lot. You can do more clicking because that's what our clinicians like. And so that's how our paperwork is done here. We know that creating your own paperwork is daunting. And so to give you a jump start or a leg up, we've created our own paperwork package that people can purchase. It's just a jumping off place for you. It's not a package that you can buy that's going to be ready-made and ready to go for you. You're going to actually have to look through it and edit it to make sure that it follows the rules of your state and your profession and your values and the things that you believe and how you run your business. But it is a jumping off place because we've already thought through a lot of these things that I just mentioned in this presentation for you. And you just have to go through and edit your ideas and how you want it to be. If you want a 24-hour cancellation policy, then you need to put it, for us, it's in there. You have to cancel within 24 hours or pay the full fee. Maybe that's not what you want. Maybe you want, yes, please cancel within 24 hours, but you only pay half the fee. Then you would edit the paperwork to reflect that. If you're interested in buying our paperwork, this is a link that you can use to purchase it. And that QR code, if you click on it, will send you right to that store where you can purchase it. I hope this information was helpful to you in getting started in your EAS paperwork. And we hopefully look forward to meeting you sometime in the future and hearing about your endeavors. Thank y'all and have a great day.